Hey guys, welcome back to Ace Recaps. Today I'm going to be explaining a 2018 Hindi biography film titled, Sanju. This movie is based on the life of a famous Indian actor named Sanjay Dutt. It is the story of an absolute chaotic man ranging from his acting career, drug use, death of his family and the entire country branding him as a terrorist. In the opening scene, Sanju writes a suicide note for his kids and wife because the whole country has branded him to be a terrorist involved in the 1993 bombing that killed over 250 people in the city of Mumbai. Just as he's about to jump off his roof, his wife stops him and convinces him that they'll find a way to bring out the truth. Sanju decides to meet with a famous writer Winnie Diaz, who agrees to write his autobiography only if he tells her the truth about his life. That evening, as Winnie is on her routine jog, she is approached by a wealthy builder Zubin Mistry, who tries to tell her that Sanju is a liar and a terrorist and tries convincing her to skip this book. Since this was very suspicious, Winnie decides to ask Sanju about it. So he tells her his story involving the businessman. The movie takes us back to the year 1981. Sanju was shooting a movie with his father Sunil Dutt, who was the director of the movie. His father was also a famous actor in his younger days and is now on a mission to make his son a well-known star around the world. Sanju tries his best to impress his father, but he lacks the confidence needed and his father always gives him a hard time. When he is caught smoking, he yells at him in front of the entire cast, which embarrasses him. Zubin and Sanju were best friends and he was a very bad influence on his life. They used to always be together and Zubin used to find one way or another to use Sanju's money for himself. That evening, after the shoot, Sanju seems to be depressed about the fact that no matter how hard he tries, he's not able to live up to his father's name. This is when Zubin finds the best opportunity to introduce him to the magical white powder, cocaine. He lays out a line on his table and tells Sanju that if he snorts it up his nose, all his problems will get solved, and even gladiators used to take it before going into battle. Poor old gullible Sanju trusted his friend and did as instructed. Suddenly his confidence goes through the roof and he breaks out dancing with the whole club because that's what us Indians love to do. Past midnight, once the club shuts down, the boys still haven't quenched their thirst for alcohol. He calls up his girlfriend Ruby and tells her he's coming over to meet her father. She is so in love with him that she thinks he's coming over to ask her hand in marriage, so she wakes up her parents. When Sanju arrives, he makes a total fool of his girlfriend by insulting her father and mother and steals 2 bottles of alcohol. Sanju even destroys a memorabilia which was passed down generations that her father was planning to give him, and they walk out the front door. The next morning when Sanju returns home, his father is seen waiting for him. He begs Sanju to give up on alcohol and cigarettes and work hard on his movie because it's the only movie his mother is ever going to see, as she's been suffering from terminal cancer for the past year. She's been acting like nothing's wrong to save Sanju from a world of pain. She then enters the room and tells Sanju that they are going to New York for a trip because she's been called to sing a song, but Sanju already knows that she's going there to visit some doctors. He tries his best to hold in his tears and just walks away and breaks down crying. The next day, he tells all his sorrows to his friend Zubin, who makes up a story about his life when his parents died. He wanted to kill himself in front of a train. Lucky for him, a religious man saved his life and gave him a paper of the gods. This was when he was introduced to LSD. Sanju puts one in his mouth and the world around him starts to change into paradise. The first time he took drugs was because he was upset with his father, the second time because he was sad about his mother, and by the third time he was addicted. When his mom went into a coma, he was asked to visit her in New York. He smuggled 20 grams of cocaine in his shoe, and lucky for him he did not get caught or he and his sisters would be jailed. At the hospital, instead of spending time with his mom, he chose to spend his time smoking and snorting snow. One night, he spots a man who sneaks into his mother's room. When questioned about it, he says that he's a huge fan of his parents, so he left a statue of God on the counter to help her through her tough time. He then introduces himself as Kamlesh. The both of them vibe instantly and go to a nearby strip club, and Sanju lays down a line on the table. Unfortunately, they get caught by the bouncers, but they both manage to outsmart them and run away. At the bridge, Kamlesh tries to get away from the bad influence, but Sanju promises never to do drugs ever again and throws away his packet. This was the start of a lifelong friendship. Kamlesh is then introduced to the rest of the family and they all break down laughing at his weird personality. When his mother gets a little better, they all fly back home for Sanju's movie premiere. His mom is very excited that her son is going to be a movie star and they share an emotional moment together. As Sanju is sober now, he decides to win back his girlfriend and marry her. He goes to her house with a bouquet of flowers, but to his surprise her father reveals that her wedding is already fixed with another man. This breaks his heart, and as we all know, an addict always finds a reason to get back to his old days. This is when Zubin introduces him to the worst drug of all, heroin. He spends the next month being as high as the sky, flying around with his dream girl by the moon. One day, Sanju gets the news that his girlfriend's father passed away. This makes him really happy and he decides to pay them a visit at the hospital and win her back. But the problem was that he was higher than the Himalayas. He enters the hospital jumping around and suddenly starts crying when he sees Ruby. He makes a fool of himself by putting flowers on the wrong body and then unknowingly insults her and her family. She gets mad at him and he gets kicked out after his shenanigans. Man, this guy lived the most chaotic life. Back in New York, Kamlesh is seen test driving a car. Just as he's about to pay for it, he gets a call from Sanju begging him to come to Mumbai and help him out as he's lost control again. Kamlesh decides to use the money for the car and buy a plane ticket to India. If only everyone had a friend like this, damn. When Kamlesh reaches India, he pays a visit to Ruby. He begs her to come visit Sanju once as he's put his old life behind and he plans to marry her. That evening, Sanju is high as a kite again. He acts like a maniac in his washroom and that's when Ruby shows up. She's in tears looking at the love of her life in such a state. She asks about his plans to marry her, and he pulls out the toilet seat and puts it around her neck, making a mockery of the tradition. She leaves and tells Kamlesh to never tell Sanju what he did that day as he'll never forgive himself. The very night, Kamlesh gets drunk out of his mind and begs Sanjay's dad to help him as if he continues down this road, he's going to die before his mother. Sanjay Dutt realizes that there's something really wrong and decides to take action. The next morning, Sunil approaches his son who's still woozy from his last night's bend over. For the first time in his life, Sunil was actually understanding towards his son. He speaks softly and asks him to join a rehab center in New York for a few months. Sanju gets irritated, locks himself in his room and begs his dad not to send him there and that he'd quit on his own. His dad agrees as long as he spends every night with his mother in the hospital as she'd gone into a coma again. He spent a few nights there looking at her, talking to her and just being there. But one fine day, he relapsed. He injects himself and just as he's about to pass out, his mom wakes up. He runs to her and she strokes his head and passes away in his arms just 2 days before his movie premiere. They decide to keep the premiere going as it was his mother's last wish even if she's not able to be there. At the theater, Sanju seems shaken up. Everyone congratulates the father and son and they sit leaving a seat in between in memory of his mom. As the movie starts, Sanju runs out of the theater and is in tears. When Sunil approaches him, he says that he has a problem and needs help real bad as he's not able to distinguish between imagination and reality anymore. They soon fly to America and he gets admitted to rehab. When the doctor asks him to tick all the drugs he's done, he ticks every drug on the list. The doctor himself was surprised as to how this man is still alive. As we all know, the withdrawal symptoms of heroin are pretty bad. They had to strap him down to a bed to get over the initial shock. He felt terrible terrors throughout his body. Some days his body felt like it was freezing and other days like it was on fire. Not being able to bear all this, he sneaks out a window to get himself one last hit. Not having any money, nobody was willing to help him. The only person he knew in America was Kamlesh, who lived 2,000 miles away, so he decided to go find him. He hitchhikes, begs on the street and finally reaches New York. The second he enters Kamlesh's house, he picks up a bottle of whiskey. When he's about to open it, he spots his dad there. Sanju and his dad share one drink together and he makes him listen to a song sung by his mother in the hospital. Listening to this, Sanju breaks down and decides to make a change in his life once and for all. He takes the tape and uses it as motivation to get him through this tough time. He got back to rehab and listened to it every time he felt like quitting and pushed himself to failure every day for the next 3 months. He imagined his mom by his side helping him throughout his journey and finally got through his drug addiction. He gets back home to Mumbai and Zubin is there waiting for him. As soon as Sanju approaches him, he gets out another 2 packets of snow. Sanju takes Zubin's packet and realizes that he was snorting glucose while getting him hooked on cocaine. His best friend was just using him for his money, so Sanju beats the living crap out of him and walks away. Back in the present, Winnie, an autobiography writer, is in tears listening to his story. She decides to come back the next day after making a few calls. She calls Kamlesh from New York and realizes that the two of them haven't spoken to each other in the past 20 years. The story is then continued by Kamlesh. As years passed by, Sunil Dutt had stopped making movies and had decided to help the Muslim victims in the civil war which was going on in India. Sanju, on the other hand, was a totally changed man. He got his life in order, started working out every day, and nobody could even tell that this man used to be a drug addict. Kamlesh was a successful businessman now, but the problem was that he was still a virgin. He used to travel to Mumbai all the time to meet his girlfriend and shower her with pink-colored gifts as that was her favorite color. The night that he was supposed to lose his virginity to her, he gets drunk and passes out. She wears the pink lingerie bought by Kamlesh and seduces Sanju with it, and they go all the way. The next morning, listening to this news, Kamlesh is heartbroken and they get into a fight. Just then Sanju gets a threat call from a terrorist warning him that if his dad doesn't stop helping the Muslims, his sisters will be raped and the rest of them will be killed. The both of them freak out and run to his dad. Sunil, being as gutsy as always, tells him to ignore those calls as he keeps getting them every 5 minutes. On 12 March 1993, 12 bombs exploded all over the city of Mumbai, killing 250 people and injuring 800. The terrorists who caused this were caught by the police and they revealed that Sanjay Dutt was a part of it. When the police interrogated Sanju, he revealed the truth. Since his father and sisters were getting rape threats, in order to protect his family, he got his hands on 3 AK-47 rifles. When he got the news that the people who sold him the guns were arrested for the bombing, Sanju was in Mauritius for a shoot. He panics and asks one of his friends to get rid of the rifle and bullets. The police promised him that if he returns to India he will just be tried under the Arms Act and not be classified as a terrorist. But this was a big fat lie. When Sanju reached the airport of Mumbai, he was apprehended by the police and tried as a terrorist. He was kept in isolation in the worst cell of all. There was no light entering the room or anyone to keep him company for the next 6 months. Not only was Sanju suffering, but his dad was equally miserable outside. He was being called the father of a terrorist and he kept running from politician to politician asking for their help, but everyone kept ignoring him as they did not want their names to be tied to this case. Sunil was also sleeping on the floor without a fan because that's how his son was in prison. This is the love of a father. Finally, after months of this torture, Sanju was finally let out of prison with bail, but he was still not out of the woods. One morning, Kamlesh reads in the newspaper that a truck of explosives was found outside the house of Sanjay Dutt. Kamlesh finally had enough of this and decides to fly back to America as his company was under the investigation of the FBI because he was linked to a terrorist. Ever since then the both of them never spoke to each other, even though Sanju still considered Kamlesh to be his best friend. Listening to the story of Kamlesh, Winnie decides not to write his story and Sanju is sentenced to prison for being a terrorist. A year passes by and Sanju's wife approaches Winnie and gives her a recording of Sanju which he managed to tape in prison. Back to the story. Even after Sanju was classified as a terrorist, his father never left his side and was with him every step of the way, giving him the confidence that he'll need to win the toughest battle of his life. Both father and son are offered to shoot a movie together called Muna by MBBS, which turns out to be a big hit. Sanju was offered to give a speech in front of a crowd and he had planned to praise his father for all his support and love. Unfortunately, at the last moment, they put Sanju at the back of the hall since it would be bad press to let him give a speech. A heartbroken Sanju goes home and even though his father tries to cheer him up, he goes to bed mad. The next morning, when he goes to wake his father up, Sunil Dutt passes away in his sleep because of a heart attack. Sanju feels terrible that he did not get to read his father his speech, so at the funeral he puts it in his pocket before cremating him. This speech will make you cry, so please watch the movie. In his next court hearing, Sanjay Dutt was finally acquitted from the Terrorist Act, but he was sentenced to 6 years in prison under the Arms Act. In the present, Winnie convinces Kamlesh to come back to India as the news report was fake, as there was a question mark at the end of the headline which Kamlesh did not notice. Once Sanju finally finishes his sentence, he finally meets his best friend after 20 long years and is reunited with his loved ones once again. Winnie finally completes writing his book, which was turned into this movie, and they ride into the sunset. That's all, folks. Thank you for watching. If you like the video, please don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Have a great day.